They told me no one would remember my work. But when their systems began to fail and the investors started asking questions, they had no idea the person they dismissed so easily was the one holding the foundation of their entire product in her hands. It started on a rainy Thursday morning in downtown Seattle. The kind of morning where the city seemed to breathe mist and secrets. I was called into the executive wing of SentryCore, the cybersecurity firm I had helped build since its first prototype. The office had changed since those early days. Polished concrete floors, soundproof glass conference rooms, smart glass windows with automated tinting. But the biggest change was the tone. I could feel it before I even walked through the CEO's door. Cold, controlled, calculated. Bryce Hanley, the man once praised as a visionary, barely looked up when I entered. He gestured toward a document on the table. It was a severance agreement. 6 months' salary. Non-disclosure terms. Nothing else. 5 years, thousands of hours, and the architecture of the company's entire identity reduced to a few sentences. "This is not personal," he said smoothly. "Just a strategic shift." I kept my expression unreadable. That had always been my strength. Bryce's next words, however, stayed with me far longer than the agreement. "Do not worry, Elena. In a few months, no one will even remember what you did here." I said nothing. Signed. Understood. "Thank you for the opportunity," I told him with the same steady voice I had used in every investor pitch. Then I turned and left. On the way out, I passed the rows of engineers, many of them typing directly into the architecture I had built. The authentication core I had written alone in a sleepless fury during the company's infancy was still in place. Still doing its job. I wondered how long it would last without me. Heading out early. Martin Yates, the CTO, called from his corner. His tone was casual, but his eyes were guarded. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to suspect. "Something like that," I replied with a faint smile. I walked out with a small canvas bag, a framed photo of my sister's kids, and a cracked ceramic coffee mug. Everything else, every line of code, every prototype draft, every IP log, was already where it needed to be. As the elevator descended, I felt the shift begin inside me. My father had been an engineer too. He had once created a powerful data compression protocol in the early 2000s. When his company went public, they cut him out and erased his name. He died with patents he never profited from. I promised myself I would never let that happen to me. And I had not. I had begun preparing months ago. The whispers in closed-door meetings. The introduction of Nathan Fields, a new so-called consultant with a resume that read more like an audition tape than a career. The change in how Bryce introduced me at panels. Less the genius behind our system, and more part of our technical team. I had seen the storm coming. As I stepped out into the gray streets of Seattle, umbrella raised against the drizzle, I called my attorney. Carmen Delgado had been with me since before I joined SentryCore. "It happened," I said. "They let me go. The paperwork is clean. Nothing mentions my pre-employment code." Carmen paused only a second. "I will be in the office tomorrow. Bring your originals. The documentation. Everything." I already had the drive in my bag. That night, for the first time in 5 years, I did not check my Slack notifications. I did not respond to emails. Slept in. Ate breakfast. And I walked into Carmen's office at 10 sharp. She had already laid out a legal pad, her glasses perched low on her nose. "I reviewed the files you sent last week," she said. "You documented everything. Development logs, commit histories, the original GitHub repositories before SentryCore even existed. This is excellent. You never uploaded these into their system." "Never," I replied. "Only the refined versions." She leaned back and smiled. "So what do you want, Elena? Do you want them to pay? Do you want to fight?" I shook my head. "I do not want a fight. I want to be ready. Because they will come. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But the system I built is too central. They will come. And when they do, I will be waiting." Carmen nodded. "Then we wait. On our terms." 3 weeks passed. On a sunny afternoon, I was drinking coffee near Pike Place Market when my phone buzzed. A name I had not seen since that last day. Martin Yates. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Elena," he said, his voice a little too bright. "Hope you're well. Listen, the engineering team had some questions about the next system release. Specifically, the multi-factor authentication bridge." I took a sip of my drink. "I do not think that would be appropriate," I replied calmly. "Given the way I exited." "We would compensate you for your time," Martin said quickly. "I know Bryce's decision was abrupt." Smiled. There it was. Abrupt. Pretty word for betrayal. "I am sure Nathan can handle it," I said. "Good luck, Martin." And I ended the call. He texted within minutes. Then emailed. I responded to none of it. Carmen called that evening. "They are feeling the cracks," she said. "They just reached out to me too. They want to discuss an informal consulting arrangement. I advised them to send a formal offer if they are serious." "Do not reply yet," I said. "Let them sweat." Because now they were playing by my timeline. The first real sign came on a Sunday evening. I was watching the sky fade into orange outside my apartment window when I received an email from Leo Brooks, a junior engineer I had mentored during my last year at Sentry Core. The subject line was vague. "Thought you should know," but the body of the message held weight. "Elena, the new release crashed 3 client environments last night. Nathan tried to patch it, but it made things worse. Martin looks like he has not slept in days. Everyone knows the core system was yours, but no one can figure it out. Even the internal documentation is like trying to read another language. Bryce is blaming the engineering team. People are getting nervous. Just wanted to let you know. I miss working under you." I read it twice, then leaned back in my chair. Part of me felt sympathy. I had worked beside those engineers, mentored them, pulled them through code sprints and deadline storms. But another part of me, the part that remembered Bryce's smug face across that polished desk, felt the cold satisfaction of a chess piece falling exactly where I had left it. 2 days later, Carmen forwarded me a formal request from Sentry Core's legal department. They wanted to schedule a friendly technical consultation. No obligations, just insight. The offer came with a contract draft and a 6-figure figure in bold at the top. "Desperation is such an efficient negotiator," Carmen commented dryly. "Not yet," I replied. "I want to watch a little longer." In the tech forums, I noticed chatter starting to bubble. Whispered complaints about Sentry Core's recent instability. Clients publicly asking about reliability. Their reputation, once spotless, now wavered under scrutiny. And the most telling sign, the investors were quiet. Too quiet. On the 5th week after my dismissal, Carmen called with a different tone. "We have a problem. Or maybe an opportunity, depending how you look at it." I could hear papers rustling in the background. A source inside Threshold Ventures confirmed that Bryce has been pitching to the board that the system was entirely his design. "Your name was never mentioned." My pulse spiked. "I should have seen this coming," I murmured. "You did," Carmen said calmly. "You just did not expect him to lie so boldly." Investors poured $10 million into the idea that he was the mind behind Sentry Core's core architecture. Now they are discovering the house was built on stolen plans. "What's our next move?" "We play the long game for 1 more week," she said. "Then we file the formal IP retention notice. Your pre-employment logs, your GitHub history, your annotated prototypes. We prove the backbone of their product started in your living room before Sentry Core ever had an office." I could almost see Bryce brushing off my early ideas during my onboarding call 5 years ago. "Just bring what you have and we'll integrate it," he had said then. No paperwork. No proper transfer of rights. Because he thought he would bury me in company contracts and rewrite the narrative when it suited him. Now that oversight would cost him everything. That weekend I took a quiet drive to Mount Rainier. Just me, a thermos of coffee, and the silence of higher altitudes. The snow had begun to melt, revealing the edges of spring. I needed the calm. Because next week the story would break wide open. By Monday, Sentry Core's dashboard was offline for 3 hours. An apology post went live on their support site. Users started sharing screenshots. One of their clients, a regional bank, announced a temporary transition to another provider. Their stock slipped another 8% by noon. Carmen sent the formal IP letter that night. It was delivered directly to CentriCore's legal inbox and blind copied to several of the investors. By morning my phone rang. But it was not Bryce. It was Yasmin Cho, the lead investor from Threshold Ventures. "Elena," she said, her tone careful but not cold. "I hope I'm not intruding. I believe we need to speak today." I let the silence hang for a moment before answering. "I'm listening." The rain returned the next morning. Typical Seattle. Gray light filtered through my apartment windows as I waited for Yasmin Cho to arrive. She had insisted on meeting in person, and when a Threshold Ventures executive requested a same-day sit-down, you did not say no. At exactly 10:30, there was a soft knock. I opened the door to find Yasmin standing with a closed umbrella in one hand and a leather folio in the other. She was poised, dressed in a dark tailored coat, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for seeing me," she said as I stepped aside to let her in. We sat across from each other at my kitchen table. I had set out coffee, though she politely declined. "I will get straight to the point," she began. "CentriCore is in trouble. The recent failures, the client departures. We were told the core product was built with sustainable handoff protocols. Clearly that was not true." I remained silent. Yasmin continued. "What is more disturbing are the claims that have recently come to light. Specifically, that the authentication system was your creation before your employment began. We have seen the formal IP retention notice filed last night." She pulled out a copy of the notice and laid it gently between us. "Our legal team reviewed your evidence. The GitHub repository, the development timestamps, the version control history. It all aligns. We had no idea." I watched her carefully. "What did Bryce tell you?" She exhaled through her nose. "That he was the system's architect. That you were a senior contributor under his vision. We invested in a narrative that now seems fabricated." There it was. The lie laid bare. "And what exactly are you proposing?" I asked. "We are convening an emergency board meeting tomorrow," she said. "Bryce does not know I am here. I wanted to meet you first, to confirm the truth before we walk into a confrontation. I would like you to attend the meeting. Present your side. Show the board what really happened." I leaned back in my chair. This had moved faster than I anticipated. I had expected lawyers, maybe months of positioning. Not a direct request to face the board with evidence in hand. "My attorney will need to be present," I said. "Of course," she replied. "This is not a backroom deal. This is about transparency. The investors deserve to understand the foundation they funded." After she left, I called Carmen. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "This is earlier than I expected. But it might work to your advantage. We still control the timeline." "What about the notification? Was it too soon?" "Not at all," she replied. "Now they know you are not bluffing. That gives you leverage. Go to the meeting, but we are not negotiating. You are there to present facts. Let the board draw their own conclusions." The next morning, I stood once more in CentriCore's lobby. 6 weeks ago, I had left this building with a tote bag and a forced smile. Now I returned with a legal team, a laptop filled with evidence, and a name that suddenly mattered again. The receptionist looked up and blinked twice before recognizing me. Carmen walked beside me, briefcase in hand, heels clicking sharply against the tile. As we stepped into the boardroom, conversations died mid-sentence. Bryce sat at the head of the table, his posture rigid. Around him sat the full board. Yasmin, Elliot Nakamura from Orion Partners, 2 others I did not recognize. Martin Yates avoided my gaze. "Miss Rivas," Yasmin said, standing. "Thank you for joining us. And this must be your legal counsel." "Carmen Delgado," she said crisply. "We are here in good faith. As a courtesy, I should note that CentriCore was served with a formal intellectual property retention notice yesterday evening. Bryce's jaw tightened. This is absurd. Elena signed an employment contract. Everything she created belongs to the company. I signed, I said evenly. But the authentication system was developed before I was ever approached by Sentry Core. I brought it with me, refined it here. But the core structure existed independently. Carmen nodded toward the screen. May we present documentation? The board agreed. I connected my laptop and projected the original GitHub commits. Each time-stamped, each aligned with dates prior to my official hire. I pulled up the email I had sent Bryce during my onboarding week, clearly stating that I was integrating an external system I had personally developed. The room fell silent as Carmen added, "You will also find that Mr. Hanley acknowledged this work in writing, but never initiated any transfer of ownership outside standard employment terms. That contract does not override prior intellectual property." Bryce opened his mouth, then closed it again. Elliot Nakamura leaned forward. "Is this true, Bryce? Were you aware of this?" Bryce's voice was brittle. "She is twisting facts. It was an early prototype. Nothing usable." Changed the slide. An investor deck. From Series A, Bryce's slide, where the system's speed, security, and uniqueness were highlighted as key differentiators. My name was not mentioned once. Yasmin looked at him, then at me. "Miss Rivas," she said, "what exactly are you seeking?" Carmen answered smoothly. "My client wants recognition of her work, fair compensation for the continued use of her intellectual property, and guarantees that her contributions will not be misrepresented again. She is not here to dismantle Sentry Core, but she will not allow her creation to be exploited." "If these terms are not met," one board member asked. "Then the legal filing stands," Carmen said. "And Sentry Core will be barred from using its core authentication system, which your product depends on." I watched their faces shift, the weight of that truth landing. And I knew we were no longer playing defense. The room sat in stunned silence. Bryce Hanley, the man who once dazzled investors with bold promises and flawless delivery, now looked cornered. His usual confidence, smug and immovable, had fractured. He glanced at the board members, searching for an ally. None offered him a lifeline. Elliot Nakamura broke the quiet first. "Let us take a short recess," he said, his voice grave. "We will reconvene in 30 minutes. The board stood and moved toward the smaller conference lounge next door, their expressions a mix of calculation and disbelief. Carmen and I remained seated. Bryce hesitated for a second, then followed the others, his jaw locked. When the door closed behind him, Carmen leaned in. "This is going better than I expected." "They are going to ask him everything off the record," I replied. "And if he lies again, they will pull out their own technical teams." "They already have," she said. Yasmin's language was too precise. "She knows. We used the break to organize our materials." I kept the laptop screen dimmed but open, ready to scroll through every email, every GitHub commit, every time-stamped document that had been my shield for 6 long weeks. When the board returned, it was Yasmin who took the lead. "We have reviewed the materials and spoken privately with Mr. Hanley," she began, voice firm and steady. "There are discrepancies in his previous accounts to us. Discrepancies that directly affect our understanding of this company's foundation." Bryce looked like a man unraveling. "I built this company," he said, voice tight. "Without my vision, none of this would exist." "With Elena's system," Elliot corrected. "Which you falsely claimed credit for in every investor meeting." "You cannot prove that was intentional," Bryce snapped. I spoke up. "But I can prove that it was mine. And I can prove you knew it." I brought up the email thread from our early days, the one where I explained my pre-existing system in detail and offered to adapt it. I highlighted Bryce's reply. "Great. If it works, we roll it out fast. No need for extra paperwork if it's already yours." Yasmin looked at him. "That alone shows your knowledge of Elena's authorship. And your choice to obscure it from us during funding rounds. which means your misrepresentation influenced a $10 million investment. Bryce turned to Martin, desperate. Tell them I supervised every part of the integration. That I directed the evolution of the system. Martin sat forward slowly, exhausted, eyes ringed with sleepless guilt. You barely understood it, Bryce, he said. You set deadlines. But Elena wrote the foundation. Every time we hit a snag, we ran to her. I know because I did it too. That was the final breach. Bryce stood abruptly. So what? I am just cut out. You are replacing me with her. No one is replacing you, Yasmin replied coldly. We are realigning leadership around the truth. And the truth is, CentriCore's future is no longer viable under your direction. Elliot chimed in. We propose a transition, effective immediately. Mr. Hanley, you may remain in a reduced advisory role, or you may walk away entirely. But you will no longer serve as Chief Executive Officer. The air shifted like a thunderclap had just rolled through. Bryce turned to me. For the first time he looked not angry, but betrayed. As if I had taken something from him. As if it were not the other way around. I hope you know what you are doing, he said quietly. I do, I replied. Now more than ever. He stormed out, the door slamming behind him. The board turned their attention to me. Yasmin offered a composed smile. Miss Rivas, we would like to formally extend a proposal. We want you to return, as Chief Technology Officer, with proper equity, control over your intellectual property, and a royalty agreement for its future use. In addition, we will issue a public correction acknowledging your role as the principal architect of our core system. Carmen did not even blink before answering. We accept, pending final documentation. I stared down at the table, flooded with something deeper than relief. I had walked out of this building 6 weeks ago with nothing but a canvas tote and a clean conscience. Now I returned with a title, a platform, and something Bryce would never understand. Ownership. Real undisputed ownership. The meeting wrapped with firm handshakes and scheduled filings. As Carmen and I walked out through the glass atrium, the whispers began again, just like last time. But this time they were not whispers of speculation. They were whispers of recognition. We stepped out into the rain, and for once I did not mind the cold. 3 days later, I walked through the front doors of CentriCore as its newly appointed Chief Technology Officer. The lobby had not changed. Sleek, minimal, white oak against slate-gray concrete, but everything felt different. This time, I did not walk past the receptionist with my head low and my exit rehearsed. I walked in with Carmen by my side, greeted by a polite nod and a printed visitor list where my name appeared at the top, not the bottom. Upstairs, the engineering floor buzzed with uncertainty. Some turned to look as I passed. Others kept their heads down, unsure of what my return meant. Leo Brooks spotted me first and stood up, eyes wide. You're really back, he said, almost in a whisper. Smiled. Looks like it. He grinned, and behind him, a few more heads lifted, recognition dawning. Martin was waiting in the conference room. He looked tired but respectful, a man humbled by the weight of weeks he could not manage alone. Elena, he said, standing as I entered. Thank you for coming back. I am not here to fix your problems, I said without malice. I am here to build something better. Openly. Properly. And I will not do it alone. He nodded. Understood. The transition was swift. The board had moved fast. Documents signed, the new CTO announcement already in press release form, drafted by legal and cleared by Carmen. The headline was simple but powerful. CentriCore rebuilds with new leadership and renewed vision. The first thing I did was audit the system logs. The authentication module, still running under my legacy framework, had been barely maintained. Nathan's attempted modifications were clumsy. There were patches on top of patches, and several critical backdoors opened by accident. The entire thing could have collapsed in another month if left untouched. I called a meeting with the engineering team that afternoon. Not to lecture but to reintroduce. I am not here to be your boss, I said, standing before a wall of glass whiteboards filled with code. I am here because the system you're working on matters. And because I believe we can do this better, together. There was silence for a moment. Then Leo raised his hand. What about the documentation? Your original notes. He nodded. I am rewriting everything. From scratch. No more shorthand. No more secrets. That earned a few chuckles. Martin looked relieved. For the rest of the week, I worked alongside the team. Not above them, beside them. We cleaned up the modules, fixed the interface bugs, rewrote core documentation, and introduced a version control system that finally made sense to more than just me. I gave credit where credit was due. Promoted engineers who had gone unnoticed. And by Friday I could feel the tide shifting. That evening, as I packed up, Carmen called. You made the tech blogs. Already? Asked amused. Twice. One headline says, the CTO who outsmarted her own CEO. Another says, the woman who brought a company to its knees, then rebuilt it. I laughed softly. Neither is quite right. No, she agreed. But both get people talking, which is good. Just be ready, someone reached out to me. A documentary producer. They want your story. Decide. Let them wait. The work is not finished. And it was not. Because for all the external validation, I knew there was still something else coming. Something unspoken. A final thread waiting to pull tight. I saw it the next morning in my inbox. An email with no subject. From Bryce Hanley. Simply read. And I was wrong. That was all. No apology. No explanation. Just 3 hollow words. I stared at the screen for a long time before hitting archive. Because I was no longer here to chase closure. I was here to lead. By the second week, it was no longer strange to hear my name in meetings again. Not as a footnote or past contributor, but as a decision maker. The engineering team had adjusted. Some with ease, some with quiet caution. Trust took time. But every line of rewritten code, every design review I hosted, every engineer I pulled into conversation with genuine interest, it all began to shift the culture. CentriCore had always been a company built on speed. Bryce had demanded product cycles at breakneck pace, prioritizing investor demos over stable architecture. But now, with the pressure valve reset, we had space to think, question, to breathe. I restructured the engineering department into pods. Smaller, autonomous groups with full control over specific systems. I paired senior engineers with juniors like Leo, and introduced a new internal principle. Understand before you build. No more rushed features without context. No more duct tape over fractures. The authentication system, my original creation, became the foundation for a broader platform pivot. Carmen had helped negotiate licensing terms that allowed us to treat it as an independent engine within the company. CentriCore could use it, but it was mine and would always be mine. In return, the company paid a fixed royalty per deployment, and my name was listed as creator on all technical documentation and future investor decks. Some resisted the new clarity. A few quietly grumbled. But most understood. The silence of the past 6 weeks, the product outages, the nervous client calls, had taught them what unspoken brilliance could cost. One evening, while finalizing our new modular architecture plans, I was interrupted by a knock on the glass wall of my office. Martin Yates stood there, holding a tablet. Got a minute? He nodded. He entered, placed the tablet on the desk, and pulled up a spreadsheet. Beta clients are coming back, he said. 3 of the financial firms that dropped us last month just reactivated licenses. And there's this. He showed me the data. Support tickets had dropped by 71%. Downtime was near 0. Code deployment speed was slower, yes, but bug rates had dropped dramatically. You did this, he said. No, I corrected gently. We did this. By doing it right. He smiled faintly. I was wrong about you. Back when Bryce brought in Nathan, I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't speak up. I thought it would pass. I nodded, letting the silence settle. There was no need to punish him further. His presence here meant more than any apology. Later that night I walked the office alone. The floor was quiet, lights dimmed, the hum of servers in the background like a steady breath. I paused by the whiteboard in Pod 4, where Leo and his team had diagrammed the new identity verification protocol. My old shorthand was still faintly visible in the corner, erased but not completely gone. I stood there, marker in hand, and rewrote the label. Legacy Core by Elena Rivas. It was a small thing, but it mattered. The next morning, I addressed the full company for the first time since my return. A town hall, broadcast across teams, with the board listening silently in the back. We are not here to bury the past, I told them. We are here to build what it should have been all along. Transparent, collaborative, resilient. I outlined our roadmap, explained the new development structure, laid out our accountability metrics, and then I paused. You all know what happened. You do not need me to retell it. But I will say this. Our future will not be built on forgotten hands. Not again. Every contribution will be recorded. Every voice will be part of the design. This company is not just changing structure. It is changing story. Applause came slowly at first, then fully. Some stood. Some smiled. Few looked down, uncomfortable. But none looked away. As I stepped down from the stage, I saw Carmen in the back, arms folded, nodding once. And beside her, unexpectedly, was Yasmin Cho. She mouthed a single word. Impressive. I gave a small nod back. Because the blueprint had changed. And I was no longer just the one who wrote the code. I was the one who wrote the rules. The following week began like any other. Review sessions, roadmap adjustments, another round of client onboarding. We had entered a new rhythm. And for the first time in a long time it felt sustainable. Until the letter arrived. Carmen brought it to my office, hand-delivered and sealed in an envelope without a sender address. Her expression was unreadable. He finally responded, she said. I opened it slowly. The handwriting was unmistakable. Precise, sharp, almost mechanical. Bryce Hanley. Elena. Underscore what happened between us wasn't personal, but it became personal for you. I thought I understood how to lead. I thought vision was everything. But I see now that execution, real execution, was never mine to claim under. And as I told myself the product was ours. But you built it. And I erased that truth because I thought it would be easier to control the story without you. Underscore you proved me wrong. And whether or not it matters to you now, I regret what I did. Bryce. No apology, no admission of guilt in legal terms, but the closest thing to remorse I would ever receive from him. I passed the letter to Carmen, who read it without comment, then set it aside. He is trying to write his version of the ending, she said. Let him, I replied. We are writing something else. That afternoon, CentriCore hosted its quarterly board update, a tradition once dominated by Bryce's monologues and slideshows. This time it was different. We invited the entire company to watch the live stream. I presented side by side with Martin. We showed real data, not projections, not promises, graphs of restored uptime, client retention, code quality metrics, and most importantly, contributor logs that now reflected the actual names behind the work. Leo presented the revised login flow. Kira from Pod 2 showed her improvements to user encryption. Nandita walked through a new onboarding API that cut integration time by half. The board nodded. Yasmin smiled. And for once, there were no executive theatrics. Only grounded clarity. Afterward, as people filtered out, Elliot Nakamura approached me. I was skeptical when Yasmin proposed reinstating you, he admitted. But I see now, this was never about revenge. It was about repair. He paused. Would you consider joining Threshold as a senior technical advisor for our startup portfolio? Blinked. I just rebuilt one fire. You would not be rebuilding, he said. You would be guiding. Making sure no one else forgets who built what, or who they owe their breakthroughs to. I did not answer then. Not because I was unsure, but because I needed time. That evening, back in my apartment, I watched the rain fall against the window. My inbox buzzed with congratulations, introductions, connection requests. But it was the internal message from Leo that caught my attention. Hey Elena, I just wanted to say something I should have said sooner. You taught me how to build code that outlives its author. You made me believe I could lead someday. Thanks for coming back. I stared at the words, then typed a reply. You will lead someday. Just do it with clarity. And never forget who helped you get there. Later that night, I pulled out an old notebook from a drawer. My father's. His sketches, his circuitry, his never-published ideas. I had held onto it for years, afraid to look too closely. But now, with everything behind me, I opened it. The pages smelled like ink and time. I saw his notes in the margins, and one phrase repeated more than once. Protect the blueprint. Because someday, someone will try to steal the lines you drew. He had been right. But I had not just protected the blueprint. I had redrawn it in public ink. It had been 2 months since my return to Sentry Core. In that time the company had stabilized. Clients who had once withdrawn now returned, cautiously at first, then with renewed enthusiasm. Journalists, once hunting for stories of collapse, began writing headlines with words like turnaround and quiet revolution. But for me, the transformation was personal. I no longer entered rooms hoping to be heard. I entered knowing I would be. Late one afternoon, I was reviewing a draft for a white paper on our new encryption module when Yasmin Cho arrived unannounced at my office. She closed the door behind her and sat down, setting her phone face down on the table. I just came from a meeting with Orion Partners, she said. They're preparing to fund a new startup in biometric identity systems. Guess who just pitched? Already knew. Bryce, I said quietly. She nodded. He's trying to build again. Smaller, leaner, positioning himself as a misunderstood founder wronged by boardroom politics. I said nothing. Yasmin continued. He brought on Nathan as his co-founder, claimed they've built a more agile framework for enterprise access control. I paused. They even referenced pieces of your system, indirectly. Did he name me? No. He's careful now. But one of our advisors caught it. They cross-referenced his pitch with our internal diagrams and saw too many similarities. Carmen had warned me this could happen. We had prepared for it. He's not the threat anymore, I said calmly. He's the echo. Yasmin tilted her head, curious. What do you want us to do? Nothing yet, I replied. If he crosses a line, we act. But until then, let him chase the version of me that only exists in his memory. The real one is already 3 steps ahead. She studied me for a moment, then smiled. You've changed. No, I said. I've just stopped hiding. After she left, I returned to the draft. I updated the final section with a sentence that had been lingering in my mind for days. Innovation is not just what you build. It is how you protect the truth of who built it. That evening, Sentry Core hosted a small celebration. Not for investors. Not for press. Just the team. We had hit a milestone. 0 system failures for 60 consecutive days. A new company record. The lights were warm, the drinks modest, and the conversation filled with the quiet laughter of people no longer bracing for collapse. Martin gave a short speech. Kira brought cupcakes. And Leo, bless him, attempted a toast with a paper cup full of orange soda. To Elena, he said, for reminding us that the best code is the kind that can stand on its own. Everyone clapped. I did not. I just smiled. After the crowd thinned, I stood by the large whiteboard near Pod 1. The same one where I had once erased my shorthand and replaced it with my name. Now, beneath my initials, someone had drawn a small crown. Floppy. Almost childish. But meaningful. In a company that once tried to erase me, I had become unerasable. Later, as I left the office, I stepped into the drizzle of a soft Seattle evening. The city glowed around me. The skyline lit like code on a terminal screen. Carmen texted as I crossed the street. I just saw the update on Bryce's company. They're stalling. Investors are pulling back. Underscore. I replied with a single word. Unexpected. Underscore. And I meant it. Because some people build to be remembered. Others build so well, the world cannot forget them even when it tries. I had once been the shadow behind a spotlight. Now I was the architect of the light itself. The final negotiations were meant to be procedural. Paperwork, signatures, formalities. But as Carmen and I stepped into the sleek downtown office of Threshold Ventures, it was clear the atmosphere carried more weight than usual. A senior partner greeted us with a thin smile. "We've added a clause," he said, sliding the revised contract across the polished table. "For your review." Carmen scanned the page in silence. I watched her brow lift slightly, not in concern but surprise. She passed it to me with a nod. At the bottom of the agreement, just above the final signature line, was a new section. Underscore, in recognition of her foundational contributions to the core system architecture and operational philosophy of Sentry Core, Elena Rivas shall be credited as Principal Architect Emeritus in all future releases, system documentation, investor materials, and historical company references, in perpetuity. Underscore. I stared at the words. They were more than honorary. They were permanent, undeniable. A name carved into the blueprint of a company that once tried to forget it. They offered this without being asked. Asked Carmen. She gave a small smile. No, I asked. The partner leaned forward. You changed this company. And not just technically, culturally. Our analysts have watched the ripple effect. Other firms are now requiring source-level credit protocols in their development contracts. You made something visible that has long been invisible. That was the moment it truly hit me. This was never just about Sentry Core. It was about all the builders behind the curtains. The women. The overlooked. The erased. I signed the document in clean, fluid strokes. As we stepped into the elevator afterward, Carmen looked at me sideways. Have you thought about what comes next? I thought this was next, I replied. You're in demand now. Board seats, policy panels. Academic journals are asking to publish your design methodology. You've become more than a CTO. You've become an example. The elevator doors opened to the city below. People rushed past, umbrellas open, phones glowing. Always building. Always pushing forward. I took a deep breath. Then maybe it's time I start thinking like one. The following week, I gave my first public keynote since my reinstatement. Not at a tech conference, but at the university where I had first learned to code. The auditorium was packed. Students, professors, alumni, even a few journalists. The topic was simple. Building with integrity. I stood at the podium, the spotlight warm on my face, and told them the story. Not of betrayal, but of resilience. Not of being cut out, but of writing yourself back in. I showed them the architecture diagrams, the logs, the flowcharts. I showed them what it looked like to be meticulous not just with code, but with credit. To protect your work like it mattered, because it did. At the end, a young woman approached me, her hands shaking slightly. How did you know it was worth fighting for? She asked. I looked her in the eye. Because they tried so hard to take it. That evening, I returned to the Sentry Core office to find a surprise waiting at my desk. A wooden plaque, mounted cleanly above my doorframe. Etched in silver. Elena Rivas. Principal Architect Emeritus, Underscore. No fanfare. No announcement. Just truth finally where it belonged. The next morning I received one last message. From Nathan Fields. Short. Strange. Almost remorseful. I used your notes. Failed. I know why now. It was never just the code. It was the way you thought through every consequence. I never learned that part. Underscore. I closed the message without replying. He was right. That was the part no one could replicate. The vision behind the structure. The story behind the syntax. The soul behind the system. And it was mine. The final chapter of any system is not the last line of code. It is the moment you stop being the only one who knows how it works. 3 months after my reinstatement, Sentry Core launched its most ambitious platform update yet. It was not built in a frenzy, not thrown together for a pitch deck. It was slow, methodical, and collaborative. 42 engineers contributed to the release. Each name was listed in the changelog, sorted not by rank but by contribution, including mine, listed first but not bolded. That was my request. We had moved beyond hero worship. We had become a team. I spent most of that day walking the halls of the office, quietly checking in with pods, offering last-minute input. Kira had solved the latency issue in the two-factor system. Leo's group had redesigned the user dashboard to include real-time breach alerts. Martin had finally taken a real vacation after the release had gone gold. Late that evening, I stood alone in the server room. The hum of machines, the steady flicker of LEDs. It felt almost like standing in a forest. Live. Breathing. I walked over to the old authentication engine server, the same system I had once written in the corners of my apartment during sleepless nights. Its casing had been upgraded, its framework rewritten. But beneath the layers I could still feel it, the original scaffolding, the decisions only I would remember. I reached out and touched the panel just once, then stepped back. And I let it go. That night, Yasmin invited me to a quiet dinner with Elliot and Carmen. No boardroom, no legal briefs. Just 4 people sharing wine in a quiet space. We were talking, Yasmin said, setting down her glass. And we have a proposal. I raised an eyebrow. We want to launch an initiative. A foundation, technically. To support engineers, especially underrepresented ones, in protecting their intellectual property. We want you to lead it. Blink. You're serious. Completely, Elliot said. Your story changed how we see attribution, ownership, and silent labor in tech. Imagine if more people like you had the tools to defend their ideas. Carmen added. We've already secured initial funding. And it will be called the Rivas Foundation, if you agree. For a moment I forgot how to speak. Not because I wanted credit, but because, for the first time, the world was offering something back without me having to ask for it. I'm in, I said simply. The next year moved like a blur. I stayed on as CTO while helping establish the foundation. I spoke at conferences. I mentored startups. I wrote essays not to vindicate my past, but to protect someone else's future. And eventually I stepped down from Sentry Core on my own terms. I left the company not in flames, not in secret, but in applause. The day I cleared out my office, I walked out with more than a tote bag. I carried with me a framed whiteboard photo signed by the entire engineering team. On it, someone had scribbled in green marker. For the woman who didn't just write the code. She rewrote the rules. At home, I placed it beside my father's notebook. Full circle. Years later I would be interviewed, studied, footnoted in business school lectures and software engineering textbooks. But the part they always got wrong was this. They said I beat the system. I did not. I became the system. And in the process I drew lines no one could erase. Not from history, not from code, and not from the truth.